a situation where you find that a person look like the same.
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
All right, welcome back. If you are just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust Television. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. Let's check out some of the stories making headway this morning. The lead story, leaders reach common ground to save Nigeria. Some of the writers there, 14 governors, Saraki, Kwankwaso, Ribadu, Dangote, Otedola, others attend parley. CBN governor, ministers present as Buhari backs movement. We are for national rebirth. This is according to conveners. And right at the top on page 34, on page 14 rather, Senate okay's bill to allow pensioners withdraw 75% of benefits from RSAs. Heads to roll as federal government investigates importation of adulterated petrol. We're going to be looking at that later. It's a second discussion on the program. Spend public funds on medical tourism. Get 500 million fine, 7-year jail. This is according to reps. Down just below the headline there, you'd see Hisbah destroys 3.8 million bottles of beer in Kano. Bandits kill DPO, soldier in fresh Katsina attack. Reps to Buhari declare emergency on ritual killings. That's really great because the issue of ritual killings have been in the news in the past week, and it's quite alarming. On page 8 on the Daily Trust newspaper, hijab, Muslim leaders talk tough, urge Kwara to change schools' names, warn against bullying of Muslim students. These are some of the major stories on the Daily Trust this morning.
All right, with that, we'll move on to Blueprint newspaper. We have the lead story there on the re-amended electoral bill, saying why Buhari must avoid conspiracy by power interests, says IPAC. And the writers there say delay has grave implications for 2023. CISLAC, assent to bill bequeath transparency, credibility, Albino Foundation tells the president, and you can find details of that story on page 6. We also have right below it, NNPC, or beside the pictorial there, NNPC orders 500,000 tons of fuel to ease shortages, and FG begins probe of adulterated imports. At the top of the page there, you'd find a story saying terrorists kill Jibia DPO, 2 others abduct housewife, and writers there that say gunmen kill 4, raise southern Kaduna community, 1 slain, another kidnapped in Zamfara mosque attack. And if you come down to the bottom there, you'd see a story on page 13 that says Zulum resettles Malari returnees with 58.5 million naira of food and others. And we also have ex-JAM registrar Ojerin Day floated 8 companies, acquired 3 houses, says witness. On page 21, you'd find a story that says AEDC resumes a MAP scheme, targets 180,000 meters. And these are some of the stories on the front page of a Blueprint newspaper.
Okay, let's move on to other papers this morning. Let's take a look at what's happening on the Punch. The lead story there, adulterated fuel. Marketers fear court cases. Federal government hints at compensation for damaged vehicles. Some of the writers there say customers having problems with fuel suing outlets, arresting owners. This is according to marketers. 300 million litres arrive in Lagos as NNPC assures customers of 20-day supply. We hope to see that happen. And then right at the top on page 24, NIMSI portal, telcos bow to pressure, begin server configuration to NIN platform. And on page 8 on the Punch, foreign treatment, reps propose 7-year imprisonment, 500 million naira fine for officials. You'd also see the story about ACF tackles Akeredolu on Southern presidency, says Constitution must prevail. We assembled 100 presidential materials, says 2022 committee. And then there's a pictorial there that shows scenes of the ongoing demonstrations against COVID-19 vaccine mandates implemented by Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau in Ottawa on Wednesday. And then just below that pictorial, you find the story about Zamfara Assembly begins process to impeach Matawale's deputy, and that story is on page 16. And on page 5, we are investigating video of lecturer shaving students' hair in classroom. This is according to the university. National Assembly PDP caucus meets and lawmakers back presidential bid. And on page 17, Wiki lends support as EFCC rearranges Jang for 6.3 billion naira fraud. Police suspect robbery. Gunmen in military uniform kill Ogun businessman, flee with car, money. And on page 8, you'd find the story about 5.2 billion naira fraud. JAM ex-registrar operated 8 phony firms, says aid. These are some of the major stories on the Punch.
All right, with that, we'll move on to the Nation newspaper. And the lead story there says Silva, government will unravel how toxic petrol was imported. And writers that say fear grips Petroleum Ministry Department, scarcity spreads to Osun. All right, at the top there, you'd find stories. This one says, Oyo government, IBEDC clash over 850 million naira debts. We also have 286 Americans, Europeans, others acquire Nigerian citizenship. Details of that story on page 2. Operators groan over rise in aviation fuel by 110%. We also have Oyetola, Lasun, Adeoti face APC screening today. Right at the bottom of the nameplate, you'd find a story that says 300 million vaccines to roll out from Senegal factory. And then we also have bandits kill DPO. And right beneath it, we have minister accuses ASU of blackmail. Their demands are being met. Union gives condition to avert strike. And we also have Tinubu Akeredolu greet fire me at 57. These are some of the stories that made it to the front page of the Nation newspaper today.
On The Guardian this morning, industry risks collapse as aviation fuel hits 400 naira per litre. And the riders, their fuel price increased over 100% in 1 year from 190 naira per litre. Air travelers to pay more. Local airlines groan over spike in operating expenses. I'd also see the story on page 2 that states 300 million litres of premium motor spirits arrive Lagos. Federal government begins probe of dirty fuel. And on page 6, Army confirms killing of 2 soldiers, 4 gunmen in Anambra. Federal government approves 286 Americans, Arabs, Asians to become Nigerians. You find the details of that story on page 3 on The Guardian. You'd also see on page 4 the story about ASU threatens nationwide strike over federal government's failure to honor agreements. You'd also see other stories on The Guardian this morning. 2022 committee rallies support for economy, national rebirth. And on page 28, talking business, MTN pays government $273.6 million for 5G license ahead of deadline. These are some of the major stories on The Guardian newspaper this morning.
All right, with that, we'll move on to Tribune newspaper. And we have the lead story there on adulterated fuel, saying FG begins probe of adulterated fuel imports, says no need for panic buy-in as FEC okays 13 billion naira contracts for aviation, petroleum ministries. Airlines raise alarm as aviation fuel now sells for over 400 naira per litre. And then right at the bottom, we have a pictorial of the Ogun State Commissioner for Agriculture and some other dignitaries, at a meeting to discuss investment opportunities in Ogun State. And these dignitaries, some of them are from Cairo, Egypt. And then we also have another pictorial of some women lamenting the demolition of their houses at Egede waterfront by the Rivers State government in Port Harcourt on Wednesday. All right, moving on to more stories. Electoral Act. Malami using office to endanger democracy, CSOs allege, and you can find details of that story on page 2. Leave Emefiele out of politics, economists warn propagandists. Don't ignore ASU's strikes or ASU's threats on strike, parents tell Buhari. We also have more stories. 14 governors, 13 ex-governors, 3 ex-Senate presidents, others met in Lagos to build consensus for national rebirth, says conveners. And you can find details of that on page 8. We also have federal roads. Nupeng threatened strike over alleged misappropriation of 621 billion naira fund. Court gives judgment today on elevation of Ibadan Bales. And then Africa GDP falls by $165 billion, 30 million lose jobs, 26 million drop into extreme poverty, says AFDB president. These are the stories on Tribune newspaper.
Okay, moving on, we have Nasrul Lawal Abubakar. He's the publisher Dateline 360 here in the studio to talk to us about some of the stories making headway on our dailies this morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, of interest to me is a story on about spend public funds on medical tourism, get 500 million fine, 7-year jail term, and this is according to the House of Representatives. How interesting is this story to you?
Well, it's an important one because, you know, for quite a number of years now, actually dating back to a very long time, people are always complaining about the fact that the state of our public health facilities are, you know, nothing to write home about. So because of that, they think if you are to come up with policies that will stop that's the major players, those who are part of the system, from accessing health services elsewhere, probably they may begin to focus attention on what needs to be done, and then for them to do it the best way possible.
Okay, so do you think this proposition is the right way to go?
Well, you know, government officials have their own ways of circumventing the processes. You know, they may tell you this is coming from maybe a friend, this is coming from, actually not coming from the government till, and that's what they seem to be talking about.
Right.
That nobody should use government money to access health elsewhere. And that's to say, if they are able to get it from somewhere, then it may be fine and good. And maybe one thing we should begin to take a look at is the fact that for quite some time now, we've been talking about this, government officials not going to public hospitals and all that. But to come up with the policy is one thing, to be able to respect it is another. And like I said, these government officials have their own ways of circumventing the process.
Okay, now talking about health, yesterday I actually saw a story, I read a story of the government warning doctors not to transfer patients from, you know, public hospitals to their hospitals. You know, what's that all about? And then talking about, you know, all the allowances, you know, Doctors Association and everything with government and all that. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, this is something that is actually out there. People have been seeing it. You go to a public hospital, and then before you know it, you end up at a private facility, which means either these doctors are denying government of the necessary revenue, because some of these things are being paid for actually. And if you can't do it at the government-owned hospitals, why take it to a private institutions? But the problem is, anytime they do that, they tend to get like a commission or something. I know so many hospitals, whenever you are going on X-ray, you know, to do certain things, they give you a referral so that when you go there, You tell the people this is where you are coming from, and from there they will be able to make arrangements for their own commission. So they're actually doing it for a selfish reason, and they're actually killing the system.
Okay. We all know that one major challenge we're having as a nation currently is the issue of insecurity. Just recently, stakeholders came together in Lagos to reach a common ground to save Nigeria, and they're just months away to the 2023 general elections. Do you think this is the right time, this is coming?
Well, I think it's a very good move. Personally, I think it's always good when the elites, come together to reach consensus, because it tends to lessen the tension in the system, because actually they are the ones who are even pushing, causing all the tension. So if they are coming together to reach a common ground, what probably I don't understand is what they mean by save Nigeria, because if you say save Nigeria, are we like already there at the precipice? Why use that language? So many people will say no, they are talking about their own interest, because if there is no Nigeria, there will be no access to all the public till and what have you. So, but like I said, it's very important that elites are coming together, because one person can do lots of damages, to the system. So if they are coming together to agree among themselves that, okay, we should do this, we should not do this, so that the system does not get overheated and all that, I think it's good for the system.
Okay, now still talking about insecurity. Sometime in December, the presidency actually came out to say that 17 months is enough time to end insecurity before Buhari leaves office. Considering that, insecurity has actually, gone far and stretched for so long, do you think this is enough time? And where does the courage come from, for presidency to actually feel like, they've not been able to do this over the years, but now, they can do it before, Mr. President leaves office?
Well, the president has access to so much information from the security agencies, from the intelligence agencies, and what have you. Some of this information may not be readily available to the people. So if the president is saying that probably he has heard from those that matter, that's from the security agents, probably giving him the confidence that this is something that we should be able to finish in 17 months, but probably they also have their own things that demands that they will require. Probably we need new sets of weapons and other relevant materials to enable them actually do that in 17 months, like they said.
But do you think they're taking the fight to bandits? Because we still hear of cases of killings, like the recent one in Katsina where, a police officer and others, were killed.
Well, I think the security agencies are trying, that's looking at the all the things, But like you said, unless we start taking this fight to the terrorists, honestly, we are going nowhere, because if you just sit and allow them to come and attack, probably even get weapons from you, then there will be no end in sight for all the insecurity. So I think the best way for the security agents is to always take this, the fight to these terrorists, so that they don't even give them time to even think of what to do.
So do you think we have the capacity to actually take the fight to the bandits?
I think we do, because you can see most of the weapons that they have been using, anytime they recover all these gun trucks and what have you, they tend to come from the Nigerian security agencies. You see it, marked that, okay, these weapons were actually taken from the armory of the police or the soldiers. Right. So if actually they can use those weapons, they should be able to do so many things.
Well, we've actually had situations where, they've taken the fights to the bandits. Would you say they actually had enough information before, doing that? Because in most cases, when they go and come out unsuccessful, the residents of, the community or even the masses end up suffering the consequences.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's why, you know, the security agents are actually against some of the information actually going out, because they think by doing that you are like emboldening the terrorists. Anytime they get this information or this feeling that actually what they did was successful in a number of places, they tend to become emboldened. And then, of course, the people are the ones that will suffer the consequences, because they are the ones that are always available for the terrorists to attack, you know, to confiscate things from them and so on.
Okay. Now we're still waiting for President Muhammadu Buhari, you know, to give assent to the re-amended electoral bill. And some civil society organizations are saying that the delay, you know, is going to have great implications on the 2023 general elections. Are you of that opinion as well?
Well, unfortunately, we are back to square one, because there are still some proponents, some saying the president should sign it, others say, no, the president should not sign it. Probably they are all doing it based on their own selfish interest. But what is the best for Nigeria? I think that's what the president should consider, and then consider giving his assent to the bill.
I think, you know, before now, there have actually been a lot of controversy surrounding, you know, the bill and, you know, direct, indirect primaries, you know, and everything. Now that consensus has actually been added, and which is something that the presidency actually wanted, why the delay still?
Because they also introduced some things that were actually not part of the first bill that the president rejected. Okay, when you are doing the consensus, you now have to include the signatures of all the stakeholders, so that it does not look as if somebody is trying to force his own opinion on them. And then there is also the one saying people should resign their appointments before
vying for office. What do you think about that? What's your take on that?
I think it's very necessary, because anytime you are part of the system, it tends to favor you, maybe more than your opponent. And this is democracy. We should be able to give people the level playing field, so that nobody gets disadvantaged because he's just outside the system.
Okay, you know, other stories, you know, making the rounds is the issue of ASU. They are still at loggerheads, you know, with the federal government, and they are threatening nationwide strike over federal government failure, you know, to actually honor the agreements. And many will say this really is not the time, you know, for this. Are you of that opinion as well?
Well, it's actually unfortunate that we are still talking about this ASU strike. Not long ago, the president was in the news saying he's ready to do, you know, the needful for ASU not to go back on strike again. And from what ASU is saying, probably this information is not reaching them, or the government is still planning at the level of planning, because maybe they have not reached a stage where they can take a decision. Because if ASU has the right information, probably they wouldn't be saying some of the things that they are saying. And the problem with all this is the fact that there are so many students out there whose parents can afford private education, who are advancing, you know, while their own colleagues at the public institutions are still, you know, like even grueling.
Okay, now this strike action by ASU actually started since the 1970s, which is a very, very long time. And, you know, students seem to be the one at the receiving end, no matter what is said, because they end up losing, you know, months or years from the academics and the academies and everything. Now, I also read somewhere that the presidency said that they do not see ASU and also NARD, the Doctors Association, as a union. Well,
the government has to explain. If that, these are, well, all Nigerians know that ASU is a union, the Resident Association of Resident Doctors. We know them to be associations. Probably what the government is trying to say is the fact that maybe dealing with one may not, automatically mean dealing with all the doctors, because sometimes you tend to have more than one association
right.
actually representing all these professional bodies.
Okay. I've also spoken to some members of ASU, and some of them are saying that some of the demands that ASU are fighting for is not really for the benefit of the whole association. Some are saying some members of the association are fighting for those demands for their selfish interest. What would you say about that?
That's normal with human endeavors, those at the bottom will always see those at the top as, trying to dominate the scene and all that. Probably it is in the same line that they are talking. Probably most of the things that are part of the demands are things that maybe people at the higher level will benefit, while those at the bottom may not benefit from it. So probably they may not support some of the demands.
Okay, now we're seeing, ASU strike almost on a yearly basis, and then we're seeing the establishment of universities and also law school campuses. Is there any need for more universities, considering that, they've not, the ones on ground are not fully, should I say, functional?
I think that's even the argument of ASU. Why create more universities when you have not been able to actually properly fund the ones that are already there? And I share this argument because there is no need. If the few that you have, you cannot take care of them, then why add? Why add more? Because they will also require staffing. They will require so many things, which boils down to funding. So if you have not been able to fund the few ones that are in existence, honestly, I don't think you should be coming up with new ones all the time.
Okay. Now, a very, very interesting story to me on the Nation newspaper, the one about 286 American Europeans, others acquire Nigerian citizenship. It's usually on the flip side, Nigerians wanting to acquire, international citizenships and all that.
I think this calls for searching, because when you are trying to leave the country, thinking that maybe it has failed, it has not been able to meet your aspirations and all that, and then here you have so many people, like even jostling to be part of the system, because some are actually doing it because of their business interest and what have you. Like, you have the Nigerian Content Act, which requires a certain number of citizens to be part of any endeavor. Probably they want to benefit from that. So they are now going for Nigerian citizenship, so that anytime they apply for things like that, they wouldn't be considered as foreigners. So they may be doing it actually for some reasons that...
So is that a bad thing?
No, it's not a bad it's actually not a bad thing, because the system has not been able to help those that's the real Nigerians, to be able to do some of the things that these people are coming in to do.
Exactly what I was about to ask. Yes, I wanted to ask, because we've heard lots of quarters, some quarters saying that, foreigners and expatriates are actually treated better than Nigerians themselves.
Well, that's also a fact, but it boils down to the level of education and then what they are able to bring into the system. You can see what is happening with so many people. Anytime you have not been able to meet the demands of your workers, you may end up actually preparing those workers for other people to take over. So it has always been like that. The expatriate quota, I think it's part of the system. Before you allow a foreigner to be part of the system, you have to convince the authorities that this thing that this man is coming to do is actually something that we couldn't get locally. And even at that, that person will have to work towards actually bringing up people in the system to be able to take over from him when the system allows.
Okay. Now, there's this story, there's virtually in all the papers. We're going to be having a more deeper conversation later as in the course of the program, talking about federal government begins probe of adulterated fuel imports. We've been seeing the queues and some are not even selling, so many issues here and there. So could you just give us your thoughts
Yes,
on
I
that?
don't know. Why are we still talking about probe at this time? Because the NNPC has come out to say these are the people responsible for
right.
bringing it. So what does the law say? Apply it. Whoever violates the law knows that there is consequence. So he should be ready to face it. So I think this talk about the government beginning a probe or something, actually it may end up allowing these people to escape without being punished.
Okay, so, but what's the possibility of such a bad product, you know, slipping the NNPC's test?
It has to do with the loopholes, regulatory loopholes. The NNPC is there, you know, they have their agents who should be able to know the kind of oil that is coming into the country. And all the ones that do not meet the standard should not be allowed to come in. So how did we end up with, you know, adulterated fuel at the filling stations?
Right.
So probably if they are talking about the probe, to know those that have been affected so far, because we've already been hearing people actually being affected in their vehicles. And all that.
Yeah,
You know, the Petroleum Regulatory Authority, you know, also said it's like just the way she mentioned, it slipped past them too. So some would say, if it slipped past the NNPC, what were the Petroleum Regulatory Commission doing at that point?
That's what we are saying. That's the loopholes, you know, and they should be able to come up with, even within their own the system, they should be able to punish those who are responsible for the slipping of the adulterated products into the system, because nobody can just wake up and come start supplying fuel into Nigeria without, you know, meeting the responsibilities and all that. So if at any point in time, those who should stop it from coming in, you know, are found wanting, honestly, they should be punished.
Now, this adulterated fuel has been in circulation since January. Is it possible that, you know, it's the result of, you know, using that fuel, you know, because we've heard cases where car owners have threatened and arrested, you know, marketers and even filling station owners and all that. Is it possible that it's because, you know, it's out now in the media that the government is saying they would actually do something about it? What if it was hush-hush?
Well, actually, if it has not been reported, if it is not known, people will be left to be guessing. What happened to my car? You know, you take the car to the mechanic and then he tells you what he's able to find out, when in reality, this is what caused the problem. So without this thing coming out publicly, the government may not deem it necessary to take action.
Okay. There's been a lot of ritual killings in recent times. I've heard stories of some tree boys that cut off the head of one of their girlfriends and so many other horrific stories. And then the House of Representatives is asking the federal government to declare a state of emergency on ritual killings. Do we need that?
Will declaring a state of emergency end it? That's the first thing we should be concerned about. Actually, this thing has to do with the breakdown in the family system. That the family has not been able to play the role that it should play. The society has also failed. Our learning institutions have also failed because you can see it's all the rush to make quick money that is pushing people into all this. So probably even our media, our movie industry, you know, has a role because sometimes what people see, they tend to practice it. So probably it's also contributing to it.
Okay, now these are actually the ones that we've heard about. There are lots more ritual killings going on that we have not, heard about. But then, don't you think security agencies should actually be blamed for this, considering the fact that they're supposed to be able to secure every nook and cranny of Nigeria?
Honestly, they will not be able to do that. That's why I said there are certain things that we shouldn't leave the government alone to shoulder. Because anytime there is problem, and before the government will get affected, we will have been at the receiving end. So I don't expect security agents to be, all over the place. Like, will you need somebody to stay at the cemetery to be watching, over space that people come to bury their loved ones? Why should it be so? Those who are pushing these people into taking these actions actually are the ones that we should be targeting, and it has to do with reorientation, family coming together to play the role that they should play, and then the society also doing its own part.
But in a situation where you find that a person look like the same,
Not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that